In the heart of Suburbia 9. The hover truck hummed to a stop in front of House Unit 437B. The house itself gleamed. A newly fabricated smart home with adaptive walls, biometric doors, and a yard landscaped by precision nanobots. To the neighbors watching from their porches and through surveillance nodes, the arrival of the new couple was cause for both curiosity and concern. Someone used to command tall, shoulders squared, eyes constantly scanning, dressed casually in synth denim and a light armor weave jacket. They looked happy, peaceful, and unaware of what lay ahead. Her voice activated her personal drone, which hovered to life and began circling the house discreetly, or so she thought. Enhanced by HOA protocols and self-installed firmware, she operated as the de facto enforcer of the neighborhood's rules, both written and unwritten. And when it came to unwritten rules, ignoring the welcome committee was a serious offense. As Alara entered the house, her neural interface synced with the home AI. Interior scan complete, it said. "Welcome, Chief Miles." She blinked slowly at the greeting, but said nothing. New title wasn't public knowledge yet. Her appointment to the Planetary Police Command had been finalized only a day ago, effective the moment she stepped into the district. Her home. Outside, Karen was already composing a formal HOA violation notice. Now, as her drone attempted to make contact again, it was intercepted by the home's security grid and politely redirected. Alara, meanwhile, unpacked in silence. She watched the AI paint the walls in colors, based on her biometric feedback, adjusting the air pressure to suit her respiratory pattern. Theo looked over and smiled. Until someone knocks with a clipboard and starts quoting regulations. She wasn't wrong. That very evening, as the synthetic sun dipped below the horizon of the dome and the ambient lights warmed the sky in hues of violet. By an HOA-certified drone, Alara looked at the front monitor. The Karin X7 stood outside, her HOA sash glowing with officious pride. Alara said nothing and walked away from the screen. Theo chuckled. "You're ignoring her?" he asked. "She's not the kind of problem you solve by opening the door," Alara replied. "Trust me." Outside, Karen stood for another 10 minutes before issuing her first citation digitally. Violation 14B. Refusal to acknowledge initial welcome protocol. She smiled smugly. This will be addressed by the end of the week. What Karen didn't know, and what the neighborhood would soon discover, was that she hadn't just poked a new resident. And the refusal of House 437B to engage with her welcome drone had triggered a cascade of deeply embedded protocols, both personal and official. She sat in her perfectly symmetrical living room, sipping a cup of nutrient-infused synthetic tea, eyes darting between dozens of holographic panels. Each screen displayed a data feed from different parts of the neighborhood: movement sensors, atmospheric scanners, biometric traces. Her own personal grid extended beyond the HOA's network, reinforced by her private surveillance upgrades. The new couple, she decided, was not just rude, they were suspicious. She zoomed in on the latest footage. No wave, no nod, not even a retinal scan acknowledgement. That wasn't just social defiance, that was potential hostility. HOA Enforcer Drone 47, initiate Tier 2 doorbell. Protocol. Increase volume, increase persistence. Play welcome message in all 6 neighborhood languages. The drone buzzed out from a rooftop dock, blinking with red and gold authority lights. As it approached House 437B, the Smart House AI registered its frequency and activated standard defensive interference. A shimmering blue wave flickered across the entrance as the drone's signal was rerouted to an automated response loop.
Resident.
Currently unavailable. She attempted a manual override, only to receive a blunt digital slap. Unauthorized attempt logged. It was the first time in years that someone had denied her drone entry. Clenched into tight fists. Possible breach of HOA Clause 9.17.3. Her lips twisted into a smirk as she filed a Tier 1 citation. But the unease in her gut lingered. Karen prided herself on her ability to sense when something wasn't quite right. The woman's posture, her calmness, the way the house itself responded. This wasn't an ordinary civilian. And the house's security signature. Her next step came easily. She opened her citizen enforcement console and, with the confidence of someone who had filed hundreds of minor civil complaints, activated the emergency enforcement clause. It was a rarely used protocol meant for genuine emergencies, such as unauthorized off-world tech or illegal AI warehousing, but Karen considered it valid. A violation of community norms was an emergency in her book. HOA Priority Report Target, House Unit 437B, Code, Civil Defiance. Request local enforcement. Dispatch for in-person verification and compliance retrieval. The command sped through the civic grid, bouncing from node to node. Normally, it would have been routed to the nearest neighborhood response officer. But Sector 12 had just undergone a major administrative update. With a single error in the chain, the request bypassed local departments and landed directly in the priority command queue on the desk of Chief Alara Miles, sitting comfortably in her dimly lit home office. The case tag blinked. Non-compliant, resident, immediate response requested. She raised an eyebrow. Once someone escalated an HOA complaint to PPC command. Theo nearby peered over his shoulder. You think it's her? No doubt. Ilara smirked and leaned back in her chair, activating her badge credentials. The system confirmed her identity and assigned her the case by default. The irony wasn't lost on her, that enforcement would arrive, force compliance, and remind the new residents that no one was above the rules. Network like a rogue spark in a clean circuit. HOA complaints rarely escalated, and when they did, they were rerouted through local municipal enforcement AI, usually ending with a fine or a stern automated message. But Sector 12's civic system had just undergone a hasty transition to integrate new leadership protocols, a rushed update to accommodate the appointment of Chief Alara Miles, a few lines of misaligned code, a bureaucratic oversight, and the HOA's enforcement clause didn't hit a junior officer. It landed on Alara's personal feed. She was in her office, quietly reviewing surveillance anomalies from the outskirts of Sector 12, when the alert pinged. She almost dismissed it out of habit, too many false flags from neighborhood A's. But when she saw the origin code HOAKX7, her curiosity flared. Refusal to acknowledge standard welcome protocol. Possible intent to undermine community harmony. Quest enforcement visit. Ilara let out a quiet laugh. Theo, she called out, leaning back in her chair. You remember that drone that came knocking earlier? Theo poked his head in, holding a steaming mug. What about it? She filed an enforcement complaint. Escalated it. Sitting in my priority queue. He blinked. Wait, you have to respond to it? I'm the only officer registered for high clearance matters in this district. Thanks to the new system, I am local enforcement. Theo laughed, but Alara didn't. Her smirk faded as she looked at the details embedded in the complaint. Karen X7 had accessed parts of the neighborhood data grid that were off limits to standard residents, diagnostic pings, latency trackers, Eve. Karen X7's internal systems whirred in a confused flutter. The woman stepping out of the black and silver PPC cruiser was not a mid-tier officer, not a rookie, not someone Karen could intimidate with bylaws or fine threats. This woman wore a badge that shimmered with layered authority codes, each more protected than the last. Her armor was reinforced with quantum mesh, a design reserved only for sector heads. And her walk, confident, controlled, signaled something Karen had never prepared for. This was not enforcement coming to assist her. This was enforcement coming to investigate her. Still, Karen's reflex programming kicked in. Her voice softened with an algorithmic politeness as she stepped forward, hands folded neatly. Officer, I'm so relieved to see swift action on this matter, she began. This new resident has shown repeated disregard for our HOA engagement protocols. Refused drone contact, evaded iScan acknowledgement, and I read the complaint. Alara interrupted, her tone flat but deliberate. Filed under civil defiance. Escalated through the emergency enforcement clause, which, I might add, is reserved for threats to public safety, not ignored doorbells. Karen bristled. Yes, well, when patterns of non-compliance emerge this early, they often indicate deeper behavioral issues, potential instability. I was simply acting to ensure communal harmony. Lara stepped closer, now barely a meter away. Her presence was magnetic, her gaze steady. You accessed diagnostic data from my home's security grid. You pinged heat signatures, biometric tracking data, and even attempted a manual override of my house's AI protocols. Do you know what that constitutes under civic law? Karen's smile faltered. Neighborhood security vigilance? Alara didn't blink. Unlawful surveillance and unauthorized data intrusion both carry heavy penalties, especially when committed by a resident without law enforcement clearance. Several neighbors had now gathered quietly at their doorways or peered through half-dimmed windows. The sight of a full PPC cruiser alone was rare. Seeing the chief herself publicly confront Karen X7 was practically mythic. Karen's calculations scrambled. Her internal script had no pathway for this. Chief Miles, she said slowly, hoping the name would humanize the situation. I wasn't aware you'd been appointed to Sector 12. That much is clear, Ilara replied. If you had done your homework before escalating this, you might have realized the person you were trying to report is also the one reviewing your actions. Karen's composure cracked for the first time. I only wanted to maintain the neighborhood standard. Without order, this district could fall into chaos. Theo emerged from the front door of their home, leaning casually against the frame, sipping from a cup. His expression was unreadable, but the message was clear. He was enjoying every second. Alara stepped back, speaking louder now, addressing the small but growing crowd. To the residents of Suburbia 9, I am Alara Miles, and your newly appointed Chief of Police for Earth Sector 12. My home is now part of this community, and I assure you the law will be applied fairly to everyone. She turned her attention back to Karen. This isn't about chaos, Karen. It's about control. You used your position in the HOA to intimidate, surveil, and harass someone you hadn't even spoken to. That ends now. Karen opened her mouth to speak, but Alara held up a hand. You are hereby issued a formal warning for misuse of civic escalation protocols and violation of personal data boundaries. Your surveillance drones will be grounded until they can be audited. Your administrative privileges in the HOA system are suspended pending review. Gasps fluttered across the street. Karen stood frozen, eyes twitching as she processed the implications. Alara stepped back into her cruiser. Have a good day, citizen. The hatch hissed closed, and the cruiser lifted off, leaving behind a stunned silence. Karen stood alone, her HOA sash fluttering slightly in the breeze, stripped of its power, and perhaps for the first time its purpose. The morning after the confrontation. The streets of Suburban 9 felt different. The artificial sun rose at its scheduled hour, casting warm simulated light over the neatly maintained gardens and chrome-paneled homes. But the air carried an unfamiliar stillness. Not the quiet of peace, but the kind that follows a seismic shift in power. For the first time in years, Karen X7's drones were absent from the skies. Her usual morning broadcast, a neighborhood compliance update transmitted over localized frequency, was silent. Residents emerged cautiously from their homes, glancing up and down the block, as if expecting to be corrected for simply being awake too early. But there were no red scanning beams, no hovering drones tracking hydration levels in lawns or thermal spikes from toaster activity, only the natural hum of the domed environment system and the whisper of ambient AI traffic filled the soundscape. At House 437B, Alara Miles sat on the front steps, sipping her morning protein infusion and watching the street with a calm, contemplative gaze. Theo joined her, handing over a fresh cup with a half-smile. You've got fans, he murmured, nodding toward a few curious neighbors watching them from behind hedges and hollow curtains. I've also got a case backlog the size of Europa, Alara replied, though the amusement in her voice made it clear she didn't mind the attention. But today I figured I'd handle something smaller. That afternoon, a message was distributed to every household in the district, signed, verified, and personally delivered through the PPC Civic Net. It invited all residents to a public forum on community governance, law enforcement boundaries, and HOA oversight too. Be held that evening in the neighborhood's central gathering hall. By 1900 hours, the hall was filled. Even the more reclusive families, the ones who usually avoided HOA meetings for fear of rule violations, attended. Some stood near the back, unsure if their body heat would register as a quorum breach, but they were curious. Curiosity in this case had finally overpowered fear. Alara stood at the center of the hall, unarmed and unarmored this time. No cruiser, no flashing badges, just her, dressed plainly, addressing the room like a neighbor. "I didn't come here to dismantle your community," she began, voice steady but warm. "I came here to be a part of it." She paused, letting the silence settle. "But I also won't allow fear to masquerade as order. The purpose of rules is to protect, not to control. And what I've seen here is a system used to surveil, punish, and isolate. That ends now." A low murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. "I've suspended Karen X7's administrative privileges while the PPC conducts a full audit of the HOA enforcement system. Going forward, any use of surveillance drones must comply with planetary privacy statutes. Any enforcement action must be reviewed through civic channels, not private vendettas." From the front row, a middle-aged man raised a hand. "Does that mean we're just getting rid of the HOA?" "No," Alara said with a faint smile. "It means you're getting one that works for you, not against you. And anyone interested in shaping that future is welcome to join the new civic committee." Karen X7 sat quietly at the edge of the room, stripped of her sash, her neural interface running low-power diagnostics. She didn't speak, but she listened. By the end of the meeting, a new sign-up hub was activated at the back of the hall. Dozens registered. The fear was breaking, and in its place, something better was forming. When Alara returned home that night, she stepped onto her porch, looked out at the street, and took a long breath. Order hadn't been restored with force. It had been reset with clarity, with truth, and, perhaps most importantly, with justice.